Hello, listeners. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Let's Talk Education Africa podcast, where we talk everything education. Today on the show, we have a really exciting guest. He has his patience is something else. I'll tell you that backstory later. But I'm really excited to have the guest we have on today. His name is Brian Baptista, and he is the special advisor to the executive director of CAFOR and regional representative and head of the CAFOR Regional Office for Europe. Brian, I hope I got that correct.
Yes, that's completely correct.
Good. All right. I would like to do the honors to, tell you about Brian, but I want him to do it himself. So Brian, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Of course. Thanks a lot, Kwame.
Right.
So I was born in Kenya like many years ago. Of course, I just turned 50 last year, so it's been some
Awesome.
years. But my family moved to Denmark when I was very young, and this explains my accent. Since then, I have been working with typically public affair leadership roles, working with governments. About 10 years ago, I decided to move to Lego, the Danish toy company, but the department I went into was Lego Education, which I worked there for some years and really enjoyed how to impact and learned a lot about how to impact education. Very passionate about Africa because of my background. And I've been working on several large-scale public projects in Africa since then. I've done numerous large projects, different places, and I'm the owner now of my own consultancy company called CoPublica, where we do large-scale projects very often. Most of them actually in Africa, and at the same time, I'm the head of CAFOR, a Ethiopian-based NGO that is tied to the African Union. And what we do is we do large-scale implementations through the African Union in different countries in Africa. So education is my big passion. I've been in education for 10 years. And any chance I have to discuss education, especially digital education, I take on because some of my views may be slightly different than what you normally would hear when it comes to African development projects, especially. And this is why I take the chance to have this discussion whenever I can.
Really, really interesting and quite detailed bits about yourself. So I always use this opportunity to ask any of my guests when I get the chance, especially relating to education, right? So what would you say, greatly influenced you, to get into education, one, and then two, what led to you being passionate about it? I'd like to hear that backstory.
Yeah, definitely. So my own story going to school is that uh, I've never been the big kind of achiever at school in terms of high grades. I did get out of my my ninth grade with the highest average in the school, but honestly, I was never really excited about it. I just always thought that education holds so many other elements than the curriculum. Yeah. So there's so many things that you learn from school that you cannot learn anywhere else, even at home. And just taking it. So I went through, I have a master's in business. So I went all the way through higher ed, not really being super interested in the actual elements that you learn, which was kind of weird because when I then started working on education, I kind of wish that I had that knowledge when I was actually studying. But what I've taken away from myself and what I'm really passionate about is that school gives you so many more things. Like it teaches you resilience. It teaches you like teamwork. It teaches you like self-confidence. It teaches you so many skills that you can use when you have to go into work and even have to just collaborate with other people that you wouldn't necessarily put into a national curriculum. And obviously, you learn how to read and write and do maths and learn about the world and all these languages and all these kind of elements that are incredibly important. But what I'm mostly passionate about is the process of going to school, going into a disciplined environment where you have to learn how to work with other people and how to perform together in a team. I think that's what makes me passionate about education, and why I believe that, you know, um, everyone that can go through an education. There's a big war in education, as you know, worldwide, where higher ed, universities and colleges have a big difficulties attracting students, because there is a discussion now about why spend those years and that money, because you can just go and work, and why not just make money now and not waste your best years in life. But what you miss out on education, I think, is this element of you showing yourself that you can take yourself through a disciplined course, you can get yourself a grade, and the statistics still show that your employability is higher by going through a formal education. And you have to be careful sometimes of listening to these few influencers that have gone out of school and now made it big, because they're not, they're not the standard. The average person, no one wants to be average, but the average person would go out, take an education, go into a field that they're passionate about, and then be more employable and be able to support their family. That is kind of the average, and you have to be careful sometimes to listen to some of the few that have made it without education. And that said, is that when I look at education, I'm looking at it more of a holistic view of the country level, because whenever we do projects, we do it on a country level, like country implementations, look at the economic impact, the development impact of the country through education initiatives. And this is why I'm saying that my passion is to look at it and say what impact it has on the individuals. That's, of course, the most important, but also what impact it has on the countries. And I know both of them are closely tied to education in a formal setting. Um, so I think I hope that answers the question about why I'm so passionate about this, because I felt on my own body that, the institutional process of going through education was just so beneficial for day, and why with my kids, my own kids, I want them to take a formal education. Now, I'm one of those parents that want to try and tell my kids what to do, but in today it's very difficult. They have their own minds, but I'm trying to motivate them to see all the benefits of going to school, because I think it really forms us as people, our mindsets, our creativity, again, all the elements that you need to kind of perform well in the workspace.
Mm, really? So clearly, would you say the education system across the board, both on the continent of Africa and across the world, is safe to say broken to an extent based on the submission that you've made?
Yes, yes and no. I mean, there's so many changes and interventions going into the school system, like curriculums are changing, mindsets are changing, so many things are changing, and we have to have a deep respect of how difficult it is to change the systems in the school system, because there's a lot of moving parts here. There's the teachers training. The teachers have to have an ability to actually understand and facilitate those changes. And so does the school system. And then at the same time, we have the workforce that has demands on certain people. And right now, there's a huge discrepancy between what the workforce are asking for and what the schools are putting out. Yeah, a very, very large percentage of kids that are going out of school are not employable in the current workforce. Yeah, and that's a massive, massive issue. So if you ask me, is the current system broken? I think in some elements for sure. In other elements, we have to have deep respect of the people that are trying to change, however, as much as they can. I think saying school is broke as a general note would be wrong. I think it requires a deeper dive into that topic to actually get it right. But I have to also say that the narrative of school is in a hamster wheel. This is the topic we're talking about today. Is that, very often when we talk about school systems, we talk about a system like it was 20, 30 years ago. And people are kind of stuck in that kind of narrative, which is kind of hurting the whole process, because a lot of things are happening. A lot of different curriculums are changing. A lot of organizations like the Ministry of Education's, Ministry of Labor and Skills, and these kind of ministries are adapting new technology because it's just absolutely needed from their workforce. So it requires more thought to find out the answer to that question. If I had to give a definite answer, I would say, yeah, well, it would go towards a yes, but it has a lot of different elements surrounding that question. Yeah.
Mm, mm. I mean, I asked that because your peculiar story growing up all through to even your getting to your master's level is a common thread amongst a large group of people, especially in Africa. If I bring it down to my end in Ghana, I mean, I could point to myself as well. I wasn't that, A star student, and that, but I don't know. I think when I did there was this degree I did, and when I got into school, I was really excited about the course that I was going to do. But when I got in, and this was for my second degree, it was interesting because what happened was I was genuinely interested in the course. But when I got in, I realized that I had to put aside if you like, the proper aspect of learning and enjoying that whole process of getting in new information, right? To where it shifted from that to, you need to really get your act together, chew, quote unquote, whatever it is that you need to chew based on the curriculum that has been outlined, and then make sure you pass your exams. So a big conversation, especially in Ghana, and I'm very sure across the continent, is about moving away from rote learning to learning that focuses on ensuring that students get enough of the information, getting enough plus enjoying, truly learning something new that could potentially add value to them, and that could in the long run translate in changing themselves, one, and then their societies, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you've touched on it, and I am also leaning heavily on the fact that if you have cases where we are having a huge disconnect from industry and the schools that are churning out the if you like, quote unquote, employees slash employers, whatever, it clearly points to the fact that there are some gaping issues that we've not paid attention to for a very long time. And so that's why we're having these, if you like, these conversations popping up. You touched on.
It's interesting.
Go on.
It's interesting. Sorry, Kwame. It's interesting you're saying this thing about you joining a course and this thing about being passionate about something. It's one of those things that I know when we talk to employers worldwide, they want passionate employees that have gone through learning, being passionate about it, because they tend to be the best employees that you can get. Yeah,
Very
you
true.
you get them because they tend to be the best in their field because they're passionate about it and all those kind of things. And I think that if you look at statistics and you look at some of that passion, it also comes from you being in a class where people are passionate in general. Yeah. And it also comes from a teacher being passionate about their field, but it also requires you to being able to assess the information as fast as possible. And this is where we go into adaptive learning, when we look at digital education, is that one of the elements that I realized very quickly working on education programs is that you can do the best possible curriculum and the best possible courses, but if you don't get that initial excitement and the student gets a feeling of this is something that they want to do and can
Yes.
do, you're not gonna do anything. And the
Yes.
problem with youth today, and even when I was very young, is that there's so many distractions, and especially today, so many distractions. Yeah, you get distracted by a mobile phone, and there's a million messages coming in, and there's the whole social aspect around social media, and media is telling you something, and then your friends are doing other things, and you're getting all kind of distracted from all kind of blinking lights that are everywhere, which means that your attention span is smaller, which means it's more difficult to be passionate about something. So one of the things that we are trying to do in some of our projects for the African Union is saying, you know, maybe maybe what we are doing is we are overthinking the actual curriculum element. Yeah, maybe we are overthinking it, saying that it's absolutely needed, but maybe we need a preface before actually going into curriculum, because most people are not fully passionate about a topic until someone tells them about it, or they read like a small article about it, or they watch a movie and then suddenly someone is doing something and it looks really cool. Or so sometimes there is these prefaces to education that are needed. And I think that this is one of the things that there is with education, is that our abilities to motivate experts or deeply passionate people about topics is just not there. And many times we leave it up to teachers had like 10, 15 years of experience in teaching it, and it becomes like, again, like a repetitive approach. And it's not always they have the abilities to inject the passion into their students. I mean, some of them definitely have, for sure, which is fantastic. We love teachers. But what I'm saying is that I think that's a deeply underrated element about education and creating, passionate people that want to go in and learn something, very passionate about something and be very good. Because I think that's one of the things that would bridge the gap between what the employer is asking for and what the people are. And Kwame, I don't know if you're the same like me, but I don't like stuff that I'm not passionate to do. I have to find my passion sometimes to do stuff, which is okay. I can do that, but being passionate about something, it just means that everything goes much faster, and you have a fire in you to try and master it. And I think we need that for more students. I think that would just that element would help us a lot. And we haven't even talked about the curriculum, or number of teachers, or the funding in education, or whatever all the other topics are. Just that element would just make a significant difference.
I think you are absolutely spot on. You are highlighting the passion bits. And for me also, I think human beings in general are wired to want to learn, to overcome obstacles, to overcome challenges. And so that's that innate need to sort information that could change the way they do things for the better is pretty much standard. And so it's imperative on our educational bodies, etc., to put together and organize, if you like, in a way that is going to speak to that innate need of ours. Anyway, let's move on to other matters. I'd like you. I know you touched a bit on CAFOR and what it is that they do. I read, as I was preparing for this podcast, I read about some exciting 10 projects which focused down or delved down to 4 high focused projects that you're working on. I'd like to hear more about what CAFO is, what it is that you do, and then you can mention the 10 and then the key 4 projects that you are actively working on.
Of course, of
Good.
course. Yeah. So CAFOR is a non-profit organization that's under the African Union. And CAFOR is this organization where it's very much about regional interventions on an African scale. So it's about making projects that can impact Africa as a whole, but obviously because all the countries are different, all the languages are different, the people are different, and Africa has such vastly different cultures and system, especially education systems. We take a few countries at a time. Right now, we're doing 4 flagship projects for the African Union, of which one of them is starting next month, funded by the World Bank. Um, we are doing a large Tibet project called the Tibet Digital Library. And the Tibet Digital Library is the first library in Africa that harnesses all the best learning in African Tibet organizations into one platform, so the rest of Africa can learn from that learning. So, for example, we are working with ATUPA, which is the Association of Technical Colleges in Africa. There's about 209 different organizations, TVET organizations in that organization. And what we're doing is we're taking all the best learning materials, converting that into digital format. Today people or youth, when I grew up, black and white text was fine. But the world has changed since then. People learn more from YouTube videos than they do from books today. Um, that's not a completely accurate statement, but it's just to say that youth really, enjoy different ways of learning, like animations, podcasts like this one, like audio, all these kind of elements we need to put into the right format. And right now there's a big gap between the learning materials that are out there and the accessibility through a learning platform. So we're building that. We got some funding from the World Bank, and we're now building the first version of that, which is fantastic. This is specifically for Ethiopia as a country. And once we have shown progress on this project, we are going to go to other countries in Africa. The next project we're doing is called the African Digital Library, which is kind of a similar setup where we're using the best African and international learning materials, converting that into a platform and availing it to all the African schools. So there is something called the African Digital Library right now, but it hasn't been updated since 1999, which is a long time in the life of education. So now we are revamping it, making a new version of it with all the latest technology, and working with the African schools to get in the best learning materials, and also international organizations. Then we have a teachers training initiative where we're using WhatsApp to do teachers training for teachers. As you probably know, I mean, the technology has moved so fast. WhatsApp has just boomed in all of Africa. What we are doing is that we're using WhatsApp to train teachers, even in rural areas where the accessibility is high, through a chatbot learning, AI learning. And this is also one of the reasons why our experience in working even in rural areas in Africa is quite big. So we're working on that project as well. And then we have the last of the 4 flagship projects, which is called the African Learning Platform. And what that is it's a platform that kind of compromises the 3 other platforms and the other 6 projects that we have. Because one of the things that we realized very early on is that there's a lot of interventions, a lot of programs out there, a lot of donors are doing a lot of programs, but just finding it and identifying which ones are good and which ones you should take compared to others can be a nightmare, because there's so many of them, and just Googling them won't make you any wiser. Some of them give certificates that are validated, and others are not validated. It's very difficult to find this out as a student. So we've set it up in a structured form, in that way. The other projects that we have a big initiative for quality education. We have a big initiative for street children. We have other concepts about the conversion rate between unemployed and employed. And these are the kind of projects. Now, the difference between our projects and other is that we're not doing programs. We're doing projects. So we're doing global projects that go in. When I say global, I actually mean African projects that go Africa-wide and can cater for the different cultures, languages, setups, curriculum standards, all these kind of elements, is what we're doing in a digital form. And the reason why we chose digital is simply because there are too many challenges with taking a traditional approach. We're big believers in physical schools. We're big believers in physical teachers, actually teaching their students in a formal setting. Big believers in that. But the fact is that it's very difficult to give accessibilities on an African wide scale if we don't go digital. And also, we're big believers in digital and seeing what digital can do. So this is kind of what our project is about. Working very closely with the African Union because of the reach of the African Union, and we have big supports from the African Union as well for the initiatives that we're running. We run right now focusing on Rwanda, on Kenya, on Nigeria, and of course on Ethiopia, because that's where the headquarters of both CAFOR and the African Union are. Also the second largest population in Africa. But we are very quickly going out to other places in Africa, like Ghana, for example.
Yes, please. You should come to Ghana as well. But
Of course.
I mean, I was listening to you, and over the period with a few interviews I've done and other things in my personal life, I am pretty excited about, the advancement of the use of tech tools and technologies to push, or change and push the way we go about delivering education. And I was really excited when I saw the Africa the digital library, and then the TVETs training, because I thought that, I mean, on a much larger scale, these two areas are pretty key to changing the way we access education, especially the TVETs training. For me, that's for me is with the continent that has the largest youth population, it makes sense to train people in specific fields, where, in a situation where they come out, they are quickly going to be absorbed by the job market, one, and then two, they are provided with if in a situation where a conducive environment is created for them, i.e., to foster entrepreneurship, etc., because they have the skills, they can easily get into spaces where they start their own businesses and make that positive change that they seek to bring out. So I was really excited. I wanted to ask you quickly, in a situation where especially the Africa digital library had not been updated since 1999, would you, in your opinion, say that the unfortunate situation of COVID-19 has been a positive catalyst in the speed with which we are adopting and using these technological and digital tools, especially in education?
Yes, I think so. I mean, there's so many there've been so many advantages with COVID-19 outside of the health elements, of course, which were not positive. But in terms of education, yes. I mean, I think that none of us would be using tools, online meeting tools at the percentage levels as we are today. All of us were forced to learn how they were going to how to use them, and also forced to learn skills that that we wouldn't have got without COVID-19, for sure. I think though that the biggest winners of this are meeting platforms like Zoom, like Google Meet, all these kind of tools are the biggest winners. I think also big winners are school systems that had to adapt quickly into technology. However, what the situation is that most of them have gone back where they were before, which means that they've gone back to a traditional setting, and not using digital as much as I would have expected. So I think yes, in some ways, definitely. I think some progressive schools have really benefited highly, where others have not benefited highly, simply because there was too many barriers for them to keep on doing it without outside of a forced element.
Interesting. I mean, that's a whole other conversation we are going to have, and I'm actually looking forward to have it with you. In your opinion, right? What does the ideal situation look like for you in terms of education and its adoption of technological tools, etc., across the continent? What does that look like for you?
Sorry, Kwame, I think there was a glitch. Could you just repeat it again?
Okay, all right. So I was asking, so in your opinion, right, what does the ideal situation of education with its adoption of technological and innovative tools, etc., what does that ideal situation for the continent look like for you?
Okay, yes. I mean, the ideal situation is to be less afraid of technology, especially in cases where technology can improve. Basically, the whole idea about school is to do two things, and the last thing is not a formalized thing, but the first thing is to create people to go into the future workforce. Yeah, that's kind of what school is. We're creating people so we can develop them so they can go into the workforce. That's what's important. Yeah, and then we have the next thing, which is equally as important in my mind at least, is that we want to create whole, happy people. Yeah. So we want to create these two elements that are, for me, equally as important. But the thing is that how to use technology is to look at those two things and say, is this something we can do today that can enhance those two elements? Yeah. Can we use technology to either make people more happy and more whole, or can we use them to be better employees of the future, or can we do both? Then we should do it. I think this is one of the elements that's kind of also missing, is that, if in an ideal situation, you would look at how do we do this best instead of saying how do we normally do this, we would say, how do we do this best? How can we pilot doing this better so the outcome would be better? Yeah. And this is also one of the issues there is with the school system, is that, very often it's difficult to assess the school system compared to the workforce. Yeah. So it's difficult to say, now we put out all these good students, now they're all going to be great people in the workforce, because that correlation is very difficult to take. It takes years to do. It says most of it is subjective. It can be very difficult to assess people in that way, but it is possible to say, in here and now, is this something we can do better by using digital? And for example, in many places in Africa, when you look at TVET training, there's a lot of great local schools. Their levels are very different. So one school may be really good, and the other one that's closer to where you live may be less competent in terms of certain fields. So there is a discrepancy in the levels and the abilities for the students to look at the levels and get the best possible education, because there's a physical barrier. Like, a physical barrier means I cannot travel 200 kilometers to go to the best school, because that's just not possible. And this is one of the elements where you can say, hey, you know what? Maybe what we could do is we could use digital. We may not take the student all the way, but at least they will get a better education, because that creates better workforce alignment. And also they'll be happier because this is a better education that's better fitted to their passion. Do you see what I mean?
Mhm.
I think we go the other way today, is that we say, if there's a school that's not as good, then let's try and equip the school so it gets much, much better. And I think that's great. That's a great process. But to speed up that process so we don't lose anyone before we do a physical intervention. I hope that made sense for you,
It
Kwame. I
does.
think it's just, let's look at it and see how we can use it. Be
Yeah.
more open. And as many of these tools come without cost, I know there's a traffic cost and Wi-Fi cost and
Mhm.
all these kind of things, but there's so many tools out there that are very low cost or very beneficial for the optimization of learning, or even free. So.
Mm. Mm. I think you highlight two key important points about structuring school whilst leveraging on technology to be able to create or to be able to boost employability in the students, one, and then two, to create whole happy people. I especially love those two things that you highlighted. But to get into the conversation proper, right? That's getting out of the hamster wheel conversation on digital education in Africa. I know you mentioned some points a bit, but I want to probe it further. The truth is Africa has a lot of problems, right? When it comes to education delivery, education execution, etc. And I hear you when you mention that there are a variety of tools, and I mean I can attest to that myself. It's like day in, day out, I keep on meeting people who are coming up with pretty local solutions to some of the local problems that we have using tech, especially when it comes to education. But the truth is, we definitely do have problems, right? We have infrastructural problems. We have enforcement problems. We have a whole list of problems, right? And that's making it very difficult. Some people in certain quarters make the argument that we seem to be, in a sense, putting the cart before the horse, i.e., because of these technological advancements, we are quickly running and rushing to using them, but we are not paying attention to building that structure that will be able to hold, if you like, the building, which is education, right? To where it's going to offer the sort of necessary skills and values and whatnot that we are seeking to achieve. What's your take on that?
Yeah. So I've been working on African projects for the last 30 years, of which 10 of those years are in education. So I've seen all the challenges with power cuts, rural places that don't have any teachers, all these challenges I've seen. Now, there's some elements that I would like to change in the narrative of speaking about African education or Africa as a whole. Because the fact is that if you look at statistics on some elements, like for example, I mentioned the WhatsApp penetration rates. Right now, it's possible to reach 90% of the population in Kenya, for example. And when you can do that, then it changes the mindset of what is possible in Africa. And it's also very, very important for us to say that Africa is different than what the normal narrative is. So basically, there is a hamster wheel discussion every single time we talk to donors about Africa, because they have a very big um, focus on the rural areas, like the last mile people, which is really, really good because everyone has to go through an education. But if you keep on having, the focus on the very rural areas, you're going to have a focus on solutions that would only fit a certain number of people or a certain portion of people in the country. And as technology is moving so fast, it's very important for me to say that what we could do instead is that we could look at education in terms of reaching the people that we can reach at this point here and now, simply because of the speed of education. And I've been working on African projects for many, many years. I've seen all the challenges. I've seen power cuts and changes in the political system, and there's lots of changes and challenges that you have to work with when you're working with Africa. But one of the things that I think is very important in terms of the narrative of speaking about Africa is that to actually take here and now stats on how technology, for example, has moved fast, how Africa has an ability to adapt when it comes to challenges. So, for example, in Kenya, 90% of the population can be reached through a WhatsApp message. And just looking at that and incorporating that in your way of thinking about education is very important, because it gives a lot of opportunities of how to do things in Africa. I think that's the narrative that we have to change, and look at Africa what it is right now. And also, a common denominator cannot be rural places. I do understand the view of going to the rural places or the last mile, and making sure everyone has access to education and stuff like that. I'm a total big believer in that. But the fact is that if we keep on doing that, we're keeping Africa behind when it comes to education. Because what will happen is that we keep on focusing on everyone has to be educated, which is a big problem because it means that hardly anyone is going to get the benefits of the latest technology. What I'm a big believer in is that you take a here and now stat photo and then you reach as many as you can. Yeah, with whatever interventions you can get at a short pace, because the fact is that in 2 or 3 months or 1 year, the technology has changed. You can just see how fast AI is moving right now. Now, luckily, we have governments that understand that. We're actually in discussions with a government in Africa, to make them the first AI nation, which means that AI has to go into the national curriculums in the school system, building the structure and the fundamental elements, like you just mentioned, Kwame, that you have to build a system, you have to build the processes so that we can, in a structured way, build a future workforce. But also we have to leverage, whatever technology is out there, and get that injected into the current workforce. Because the fact is that if we don't do that now, what will happen is the entire world would move forward. So while we still have this narrative of Africa that, we have to go to the last mile and we have to make sure that all our interventions reach every single child, and all of this very donor kind of oriented language, which I totally support, for sure. I mean, I think everyone supports that. But the fact is that we need to just go outside of that, especially now, and say, let's reach as many children as we can, reach them in the ways that we can currently. Let's make sure that we give them the abilities to work in a modern way. I think actually ChatGPT is a good example, that ChatGPT is now disrupting so many fields, like so many different positions where some people have the abilities to perform much faster because they know about ChatGPT. They know how, in marketing, for example, in business or in sales, they know how to utilize this tool, to optimize your work. And if people are not educated in that, they're just going to be shot behind. And this is my biggest fear when it comes to Africa. Um, and it's validated in so many ways, is that if we keep on having the same narrative of how to do development and how to do education in Africa, we're going to keep on creating a gap between Africa and the rest of the world. That is not needed and not necessary at this current stage. There's so many ways of educating our next level of children. I think Finland is a good example of a nation that's going, outside of the curriculum, building people, saying that we need less hours and all these kind of elements. And there's a lot of criticism of what they're doing, but the fact is that, these kind of interventions are really good. The Danish school system has gone the opposite direction, where we are adding more classes to the day, where the Finnish has gone the complete opposite. Two countries that are so close to each other. So it's just an underlining of, um, looking at Africa as, first of all, of course, of a nation of so many different countries, but at the same time saying, you know what, we actually have a lot of people we can do very cutting edge interventions to. We can even use first, all the best technologies out there. We can actually reach them right now. Let's not keep the current narrative, but say we have two pools of people. We have the reachable populations, that we need to do something for now. Then we have the rest of the population that we need to reach. But maybe we can use the first pool of people to reach these other people. Yeah. So we start moving the countries in terms of development. I think that's what's needed for us to change the current situation. Because I know that there is this thing about, African is still seen in a certain way, and we need to change that. People like you, Kwame, I mean,
Mm.
modern youth, that know about technology, you have the skill sets of competing with any American or any German or any person in a developed country in terms of skill set. You can go directly in and take jobs, participate in the economy because of you, with your experience and your level of education. But if we don't keep on giving you the latest technology and looking at people like you that are very competent and ready to be part of the current workforce, we're going to keep, a whole generation behind, and also the future generations. So I think that this is one of the reasons why this hamster wheel thing about, let's go outside of the normal narrative of how to look at Africa. Let's look at it at where it is currently, because there's so many youth out there that are very employable. They just need a bit more in a formal setting or a non-formal setting. And this is one of the things that I'm also saying is that, we have a very clear-cut idea that formal training is needed, and I'm totally a big believer in that. But we also have a lot of people where, I mean, all we should care about is, are we making people more employable by doing something? Then we should do more of it. If we make them more and more employable, it doesn't matter if they're taking a 1-day course or a 2-week course or a 3-month course. It doesn't matter as long as we're moving them towards being more employable and getting more jobs.
Yes.
The thing is that we often see youth having low motivations and actually taking a training course. And the reason why they're not as motivated is that it takes them a long time to take a training course. It's typically a formal one, and then they have to spend a lot of time and resources and money and stuff like that. And then after 4 years or 3 years, they get a monetary gain. Yeah, the return on investment for an unemployed youth can be very difficult to oversee. Yeah, it's a bit of an investment, and if they're not very passionate or very motivated, it's very difficult to get them there. So what we said is that all we care about is to make this person more employable. So what if we combine a training course directly with Fiverr and Upwork, for example? I don't know if you're familiar with Fiverr and Upwork, but what it is these are websites where you can get, if you want to sell your abilities to do graphical design or website design or system administration or whatever you want to do in terms of selling your services. With one of our platforms, you can actually take a training course, and then it combines you directly with these platforms. Because what we said is that if we want to motivate people to take a training course and be more employable and be better at what they want, if they can get a monetary gain and sell their services, they get experience immediately after being trained. And if it takes them 1 day or 10 days or 3 months to take this training course and they can make money at the same time, I think that's a perfect setup, because everyone is motivated in learning. On these Upwork and Fiverr and these kind of websites, they get scores based on the quality of their work, which ultimately means that they're more and more motivated and becoming better and better to get more and more scores, because that gives them the abilities to be booked more on the platform. So I hope you see how the connections between getting a monetary between being trained and learning more, getting more experience and getting a monetary gain, we can shift that downwards into being a very immediate thing, which means that we can actually get the people passionate about it. This is the kind of interventions we do in a digital sense, where we say all we care about is two things. We care about if they are more employable and are they happy as people. And I wouldn't say there's always a correlation between those two things, but they tend to stick together. Yeah. So if you're employed, you get money, you can pay for your family, you can do the things you're passionate about outside of work. You can be more happy at work because you fulfill the role better. So there is a correlation between being happy and you being able to get a job and participate in the workforce.
Brian, I'm not sure anyone has spoken, and I've just been nodding my head in agreement for like a full minute, because I think what you said is absolutely spot on. But then I don't know, whilst you were speaking, something just came to mind. Do you think that in order to access funding, right, from say the World Bank and all of these other donor organizations, when it comes to specifically improving education outcomes, etc., do you think that we sort of have this issue of going round and round the hamster wheel, where because they are dealing with countries, right? So when it comes to dealing with education on a country level, it requires that it involves taking care of everybody. So from the people who have relatively good access to education, all the way down to the last mile people, like you call them, right? Do you think that I'm sure maybe on another level you can have NGOs, private NGOs who sort of fit into what you were describing, i.e., the fact that we'll deal with the people who are already doing a good job, or we can lay the foundations for people who are already, in the space where giving a little, they can be better and be more competitive with the people across the world, as compared to having huge organizations, say maybe even the African Union, right? If in a situation where it's going to access funding from, say, the World Bank or other huge donor organizations, they would have to create a structure that involves everybody. Do you think that's what's slowing the adoption or the speed with which we should be having the conversation of incorporating technology and speeding up things across the continent?
I think, although I understand the argument, and actually, as I said before, I mean, everyone is equal. Everyone needs education. Everyone, everyone believes this. Any donor, any government, any person you talk to, almost would say the same thing, is that we want to reach everyone. The fact is that if you look at statistics, you can see that African education hasn't moved that much for many years. Yeah. And when you keep on doing the same thing and expecting a different result, you're gonna fail. Yeah. So I have deep respect with the stuff that actually has happened, but if you look at it as a whole, it hasn't moved much. Yeah. So if you look at it that way, we need to change some things. And this is back to the narrative again, is that um, so when you go with a large organization like the World Bank is pretty progressive. So I don't think that's a representative organization. But some of the other organizations, they fundraise themselves, and they have they're motivated in keeping the narrative of Africa of being in need and taking that kind of levels, because that's why they're getting their funding. Yeah. Um, what I'm saying is that there are other ways of doing international development. Um, and some organizations have really nailed it really well. So, either you take this very broad approach, very, very broad approach, and try to reach everyone, and then you have a lower average of the impact that you can have because you have to go so far out. Or you go in and you look at individuals and you build individuals, and then you do development through the individuals. So, for example, I've seen organizations go in and educate like doctors, teachers, other prominent people in the societies, saying if we teach them this, they can build societies through their learning. Yeah. So they're saying, let's go targeted, because going targeted has a deeper impact on the country compared to going to every single person. But I do understand how difficult a discussion this is. This is a very difficult discussion, also because it goes into like countries, voters, just human, the way that you look at human development, and what you want to do and change in the world is that you want to make an impact where it truly matters. And I'm a big believer in that. What I'm just saying is that let's look at a different approach to many of these elements. I'll give you an example, Kwame. So right now we are educating system administrators. Yeah. And because this country in Africa needs over 50,000 system administrators, and these system administrators go into fields like agriculture, tourism, all these other in the industry, simple manufacturing and all of that, but they need simple system administrators. Now, if you take a typical donor narrative, it would be that we need to go across the board, and then we need to educate 50,000 students, but we have to make sure that every rural area we can get the system administration trained, so everyone can participate, which is a very good human way of looking at it. However, the barriers towards doing that are much greater than going into accessible areas, getting 50,000 people trained, getting them into jobs, and then letting those salaries and those impacts on their economies build the nation in terms of tax payments, in terms of school fees payments, in terms of all these kind of derived elements there are around it. So when I say all of this, I have deep respect for the last mile, and I'm not ever gonna say that it's not needed to have a focus on them. But what I'm just saying is that maybe it's time now to have a different view or a different mindset on many of these projects. A lot of NGOs are working at the last mile. I think equipping a lot of NGOs with more IT skills it would be really good. Even some of the large NGOs, their IT skills or their understanding of IT is just at a very low level. And I think we can optimize a lot of their projects and interventions at the last mile just by teaching them some more about what kind of tools that they can use. So there are ways to do both at the same time, but I don't want Africa to be left behind because we have a certain narrative that we can't get out of, and also is not backed up by data. So I think that, let's look at where it is. I think AI is a good example right now. You've probably seen how fast AI is changing the world. Since last summer, AI is just changing the world significantly. And if you in Africa do not, or if we in Africa do not take that seriously, we're going to have a whole nation or whole continent being left behind significantly, actually, in terms of the future workforce. We're going to be left behind in all kind of elements, and also being opened up for constant movements from other major nations in the world that can kind of control the countries better. And I think it's better to look at Africa as what can we do at a shorter term to get people into jobs, to get people trained, to get the right stuff into the curriculums of the schools, so that we can kind of build the nations and be more adaptive and adapt to the current situation. Since everything is moving so fast, we can't teach people or students the same way as we did 40 years ago. And actually, that's what we're doing. So this is why I'm saying let's change the narrative. Let's look at stats of what is actually possible right now, and let's try out some more stuff and utilize some of the constraints in Africa to our advantage. So, for example, I was working with one of these donor organizations that had a big constraint because there was no Wi-Fi connections until we kind of explained them what 4G can do right now in Africa, or any kind of mobile connections can do. And once we showed them the statistics, they changed their mindset, and the interventions that they wanted to do were now possible. It's simple things like that that I think we need to change in the way of looking at Africa.
I mean, I am agreeing with you wholly. I think you are absolutely spot on. While you're speaking, a few things came to my mind. It was marketing 101. It says that you cannot sell to everybody, right? You need to segment the markets, pick a specific group of people, and then target your product or service to them. That's one. And then two, the second thing that came to my mind was the journey of 1,000 miles starts with one step. It doesn't start with the whole step. It starts with one. And then a single drop of water makes a mighty ocean. I absolutely agree with you and everything that you've shared, Brian. Unfortunately, we've come to the end of this discussion. I will personally look for you, and I know you definitely come up on the podcast again. There's a lot we need to discuss. But to wrap up, I have thoroughly enjoyed the insights that you've shared. You've shown the true understanding of especially the education space across the continent. One of the things I'm taking away with me that's adding to especially the tech argument is the fact that in Kenya you have about almost 90% of people that you can get through WhatsApp. I thought that was incredibly insightful for me, and it's showing the power and the penetration of technology across the continent. Brian, thank you so much. Thank you for the patience you've had with me when I had, slide glitches while I was getting this meeting together. You shared really, really, really good stuff. You showed creativity with some of the solutions that you offered, and I'm sure the listeners of our podcasts have been, first off, they've been educated, they've been inspired. If you're an entrepreneur, you're a student, you've been inspired. If you're in the education space, I'm sure you've picked a thing or two from the discussion we've had today with Brian. Brian, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure talking with you today. We'll definitely stay in touch.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Kwame. It was a big pleasure. And anytime I have the abilities to discuss these topics, I'm very happy to join you again.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you, listeners, for joining us on this exciting episode of Let's Talk Education Africa podcasts. Until this next episode, bye.